Well, first, I would say congratulations for you and your wife.
Thank you so much.
First, you get some kind of unexpected condition, like you're accepted as a resident, legally resident. I
Yeah,
think
yeah, I've
I
gotten permanent
I think
residency.
I know it's a very difficult situation for dissident and for person in exile. I still hold Chinese passport.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Even after 12 years in United States and many years in Europe, in Germany, I can easily get whatever the kind of thing. But I still, it's very difficult. It's almost like some choice you don't want to make, but you have to, push you into that condition. I know how difficult that can be. So I congratulate, you're safe. Safety is most important, and you're happy with your wife and the upcoming children. And
Thank you.
he's going, when will be their birthday? Time.
We don't know exactly yet, but it should be
Okay.
right around the new year. Yeah.
Okay, because next year will be uh, year of ox. That will be exactly same year as my son. He's 12
Oh,
years
wow.
old. Yeah, but it's, once you have a baby, it grows really fast and give you so much. It'll give you tremendous joy. You will never understand. It's so much because I cannot go back to see my mom. He's 87. And
Hmm.
I think you have the same situation with your father or stuff.
Yeah,
So
this is one of the things when you talk about the changing of residence and exile, how it works, the separation. The thing for me is people get confused. They think it's like I've decided to like become Russian and forget that I'm American or something like that. But I'm not giving up my American citizenship. I'm not any less American tomorrow than I am today. And I think actually, I'd like to think it's the same for you, because the government has a problem doesn't mean that you have a problem. Like, it doesn't make you less Chinese to think differently than the Communist Party. I would argue that actually makes you more someone of the country, of the nation, and separate from the government. But so many people today, they think of as
yeah,
the government and the nation as the same. But I
yeah,
think they're separate. In so many places we see governments that hold different politics than the people, and the people. There's two problems that we have generally. One is that the people don't know what the government is doing, and then there's a second problem that people do know what the government is doing, but they either don't care, they don't think it's serious, or they do care and they don't think they can do anything about it. They don't think they have the power to change it. And this is something that I wanted to ask you because I think it's really interesting. So much of the Chinese perspective is not, you don't really hear it in Western media because, the Chinese state, the Communist Party, they put forth these voices that are just completely pro-government. They explain away the most terrible things. And then you have the voices of people like you who have made enormous sacrifices to say something different, to say something honest and independent and true. But at the same time, people like you and me who have faced so many consequences for saying what we've seen and what's actually going on, that people begin to think of us as not normal, as separate from like the average person, the ordinary person. And what's missing in that conversation is what the average person in China thinks. So what I want to ask you, based on my experience in the United States, in this surveillance scandal in 2013, where we saw the United States government was breaking the law, violating the Constitution, its basic principles, to spy on people in the United States and around the world in ways that it wasn't allowed to do, but they still did it anyway because it gave them power. And then you ask, you think about what all these political figures, these elite figures think, and then they ask what all these media figures think. But somewhere in the middle of that, what's lost is what the ordinary person thought. And I've come away with this feeling because all the elite figures say ordinary people don't care. But when I go and speak at universities, when I speak to normal people, when I have a talk in private, everybody cares. The problem is they don't feel like they can change it. They feel like they don't have the power to change it because the government decides these things for them. The legislatures, even after elections, decide things for them. And our elections, where, in places in the world where we have elections, are increasingly becoming not a choice of who you're for out of all these people, but who you're against. And people vote against keeping the bad guy out of office instead of putting a good guy in office. So I guess I would ask, in this different setting in China, and then broadening out to the world, because I think your art, a lot of this is trying to help people comprehend scale and think about what's actually happening, is do you share this experience where you feel like people actually do care? They get angry when they have the conversation. They feel something when they have the conversation. They're bothered by it, but they don't know what to do, or they don't feel like they can do something. And how do you think about that?
I think this is several challenges here. If you talk about in general, people, we have to trust people. It's just like human beings, like you and me, and they know what's right or wrong. This is a basic moral background, or maybe some religious beliefs or background. But since people has no tool to exercise or no language, so basically they never trained to have a language. So that makes them feel powerless because the language, the vocabulary, who is going to listening, and the mainstream are so powerful. They are monsters. They are, because they have the language, because they have the profit. They are very clearly a profit-seeking, very greedy, and very. It's just like monsters. But the rest of the people, they just trying to keep up the job and have a little family happiness, and trying to be secure and not to catch the disease, or not to or they played by politicians to hate someone, or to forcefully to choose another which not necessarily is better. It's just someone who can, but they are same. Basically, they are same. All the powers have the exactly same nature. China or United States, they have so much similarities than differences. The differences is only for their argument. So then you very clearly you have a powerless people or silent majority, and you have very powerful corporations or elite or even medias. The most medias is lying. They're lying sometimes by, like in China, they just clearly distort the information, but also in the West, they just leading you with some information and not to carve up the argument and not to show certain informations. That's also, it's a lying. If you don't show the total truth, that's lying. So individual like us, of course, you choose this very difficult path to seek for the absolute truth, so-called absolute truth, but factual, to be factual on certain matters, or even to think this is what benefits the society. But society will not take it that easily, because how people only worried about the next month's rent, or those things. So, but still, I think we are living under the belief we are part of them. We have that kind of responsibility and the belief. You say, I'm just part of you. I'm just a little bit privileged, to come up with vocabularies and have this kind of conversation and talk, and and I believe people watching it would understand. But of course, life is short. We do what we believe is right. So, that's the biggest gift we give to ourselves, and we are very privileged in that way, you know, to speak the truth.
So I'd ask you, when I think about, my interactions with journalists and all the years since, one of the questions that came up repeatedly is like, why me? Why did I do something when there's 30,000 other people at the NSA who didn't do things? And I've had a lot of answers in a lot of different ways that I've thought about it over the years. Not everybody knew all the things that I knew of the people who knew all the things that I knew, because the offices that I had worked in, because the experiences that I've had, because of the accesses I could have. I could see new parts of, what this part of the government was doing in this part of the government. And not everybody shared that, right? So it's already a smaller group that can do this. And then of that smaller group, there's an even smaller group of those who actually plausibly could get this information out of the building. And these are largely workers in technology, who can do this kind of thing. And then there's the people in technology who actually have the training, like I was at the CIA, who think they could, get it out of the building and not get noticed. And then, people who could talk to journalists. And so it's a smaller and smaller group. And, there's this question of, all right, was it really just me? Or were there more people who could have done it and didn't do it because they were afraid, or this, that, or the other? And I think there were more people who could do it, and they were just afraid to do it, or they didn't care that much to do it, because I was afraid to do it, and I didn't want to do it. And I waited a really long time until I actually did do it. And so maybe I waited too long, actually. And then I talked to journalists, and the story goes on from there. But for you, when you think about the fact that you've been pretty successful, and in a lot of power structures in government, particularly when you're not dealing with national security agencies and these big police states, they've got two ways of trying to keep people silent. One is fear, that there will be some consequence, there will be some punishment. And the other one is inducement, where they try to reward you, they try to, make you more successful. They try to buy you out, basically. How is it that with your experience, you found the courage to not only speak against the system, but to continuously do it, to keep going?
Yeah, that's always the question. People would always ask why you care about this. You come from that kind of family. My family is first generation of revolutionary. As colleagues with Chairman Mao, Zhou Enlai, same generation. A little bit younger, but at the same effort. He's the most patriotic poet of China. And also, when I moved out of China, I started to pay attention to, the refugee situation globally. That's basically for myself learning and study about global politics. I don't want just to be, named as a decorative, strange names of anti-communist. I'm not just anti-communist. Communist has not much for me to anti for. I'm anti-authoritarian. I'm anti any place which not put humanity as a issue. Is just which against me in every aspect. So I'm privileged because my father was exiled when the year I was born. So I'm very I know what's it like when he has to do the hard labor in Xinjiang. In the re-education camp, 20 years forbidden to write, and to clean the public toilets. And for years, I have to go with them to, I was 10, 15 years old, and to go through, to see his daily job, to clean the farmers' toilets, as a punishment. So you start to have this impression about humanity, about how wrong the power can be and how blind blindly the folks, the basically the public can be, it's very dark, long tunnel. And to going through that, it's not enough. I'm artist, I'm architect. I have been quite, well, doing very well, but at the same time, I'm not interested because it doesn't really reflects who I am. Till 2005, it's very late. I start to get on state internet because they convinced me, said you're so famous and have so much opinion. We set up a blog for you. So once I got on the blog, I realized this is for me, it's a heaven, because there's no chance individual ever in China can speak out, But I suddenly realized daily I can have thousands followers repaste my article, then I become crazy. So I become crazy during the Chinese Olympic time, the 2008, and many things happened. But by 2009, I already have a physical, conflicts with the local police. So the rest story is, it become normal. But as you said, once you relook at it, it's still very rewarding. Even we're in the exile situation, you relook at what we have done, or what I did something wrong, or then you get the total picture. Most people not even had one step. They're sitting there when they're born, and they're never afraid to make one step because the whole education system told them, don't do it. If you do it, you will lose everything. So we made the step. That step leading to the second step and third step. I think that's how you make a journey. And the people, I believe that journey is important. That's life itself. It's an announcement of a life.
You say a lot of things that resonate with me there. One of the things that I think is interesting is you said, your politics are it's not about being against, communism or anything specifically. It's anti-authoritarianism. And this is something that in the United States and a lot of Western countries, I think, has actually been forgotten. Because we, whether it's on the left or the right, we're normally talking about center-left and center-right of politics. And this means, it's more of the structural, institutional, corporate left or right. They're very interested in the making of rules and the declaration of rules and the systemization of rules that they are writing, right? Whether they're on the left or the right, they all agree the government tells you what to do, you follow it. As opposed to the more traditional liberal idea, where we have the very fewest rules necessary for society to sort of continue peacefully. Now, one of the criticisms that I faced tremendously within my government, and I still face from critics, is, okay, whether or not what Snowden did was right or wrong, whether or not what the government did was right or wrong, whether what the government did was moral or immoral or legal or illegal, what Snowden did was against the law. And so there's kind of this replacement of the individual's idea of right and wrong, society's idea of right and wrong, with the rule of law. And we understand the rule of law. We think the rule of law is a good thing generally. But when the rule of law spreads so far, and the application of law, the creation of law by politics, begins to narrow what you can do so much, that now speech is against the law, even when it's saying something that the public needs to hear, should have heard. It never should have been secret in the first place. How do you think about this idea, even if there is majority support, that things can be made illegal, that maybe should not be possible to make illegal? And like, when you say anti-authoritarian, what do you mean? What are the limits of authority? What are the limits of lawmaking? in a society, or should they be? And how should ordinary people who are doing everything they can within the law to dissent or object, but can't achieve anything, how should they think about this conflict, this tension?
The authoritarian character is they always think law is on their side. That's number one character. And they always have a last sentence. So with that kind of arrogance, against the law is revolutionary. Because this is every law in the history has been changed. Law is made by people, very often are made by privileged system. That system is self-protecting, and it's no way you can have development not to against the law. In scientists, every new research or all the scientists, all effort is against the scientific law. Is trying to break what has been established, But in the political situation, that law can last 100 years, or they use that to crash all those individual mind, meaningful thinking, and strong argument, and that is most worst crime than any other crime. You see what happened in China or in the United States in general, in mainstream, the media and the public consuming, is much worse than environmental problem. People not conscious about. Of course, they worry about fish, they worried about the temperature, but they really should worry about is our human condition, our brain. Is that brain has been horribly polluted, and how much real thinking or how much meaningful ideas belongs to you, even you could be graduate or poster or even professor or so-called leaders in thinking, but how much ideas are really come from you when you wake up in the morning, you wash your face, you're so clear, but you're just repeating those kind of, rubbish all the time. So that kind of society, that kind of law, or that kind of idea, it kills the world, kills the modern world. The modernity is totally being abandoned by that kind of thinking.
It's interesting that you mentioned climate here, and you also mentioned influence, because I think a lot of these systems are linked. When I think about mass surveillance and the controversy that resulted from it, we changed laws in the United States. We changed laws in Europe as a result of this reporting. Policies were changed, and it's like, okay, great. But the system itself didn't really change meaningfully. The laws that were changed were small laws. They were made more to reassure people, to release some pressure against the system, than they were actually to stop the abuses that had happened. And along with the passage of these sort of new light reform laws, which should have been seen more as a beginning than an end of the reform process, this influence machine goes into action. That, as you say, they put a couple, CIA officials, NSA officials, White House officials on the media that explain, why this is great and why everything's okay now, why it was never really a problem before. But anyway, just because we're so wonderful, we've changed the laws to make your life better. And a lot of people in media, they repeat this. They write the quote. They say such and such said this. And then it gets put out through political sort of partisan channels and reporting. It goes through the more like press wire service reporting, where they try not to take a position and they just say such and such said this, such and such said that. And then people begin to take these statements that were reported as facts that were reported. And then it goes into, the Facebook, Twitter stream where everybody's in open combat all the time, and they're just repeating things and distorting things to make it more of sort of a reality. And then we get to this world that we have today, we see so clearly now, that wasn't so clear then, where people are pushing positions using quotes and reporting and misreporting to try to create facts or create a reality that's not true, but it is popular. And we look at things like YouTube and Facebook that decide, what to show you next in this feed that agrees with what you already think and, reinforce these structures and realities. And eventually what we have is this influence machine. And I very much think this is responsible actually for climate inaction in a real way. Because when you look at the science, a lot of people understand what's happening to the world, what's happening to the way things are changing. But again, we run into this system where a lot of people care about it, but they don't feel that anything can be done about it. And it's interesting because I think a majority of the media is actually backing things like climate reform. But there are factions within the media, certain verticals like silos, almost like generals for the troops of their population, that are giving them the quotes and the facts and the misreporting to say why you don't need to worry about it or why it's not reliable. And these influence machines, it's not just about climate. It's about every issue. It's about the election in the United States. It's about China. It's about America. It's about Russia. It's about Germany. It's about immigration. It's about anything that you think about. It's about technology and tech companies that are constantly happening, even when we're asleep, because half the time it's run by machines, to help you be certain of a world that's not really being proven or established. It's merely being talked about. What's going on with that, and what should we do about that?
I think you really put up a very, very general situation here. We are human being, a product of this mass popular ideas. This is just like in the supermarket. You walk into it, you realize this, they have everything, but what you need is really a few, but very hard to find that few. But you really have ocean-like of choice. It's not you don't have a choice, but the choice are made. Then you realize most products are made by same company. It's just different names. This is a tremendous imbalance of the mass, this kind of corporative culture or capital cooperative authoritarian, or China you can call the state capitalism. They have been so powerful. They are truly, truly very powerful. And they established this kind of structure, which is so complicated, and very a few people can really escape from that kind of net, and the system are still alive. It's very few can be. You always will be damaged by that. That's why I think the position of real thinking or thoughtful people are very extremely rare, because they're rare. It's so important.
How do we develop that? How do we cultivate that kind of independent thinking when everybody's in the supermarket with 1,000 choices that are trying to make you think you don't want something new, you don't want something that's already there, you just want something in a different part of the supermarket or something that's a different color? How do you find that original thought?
In the history, you have some system like religion. You believe certain higher existing order or truth. Now people has no religion, or basically, I'm not, but I still believe there's initial very, very original way of appreciating life itself, and enjoy the very normal situation. Because basically, if you look at in the city, or you look at people's job, it's not so normal. You can tell they spend their most important time in school, the school really educates them to become a part of a system. Then they become part of a system. They have to survive in there, spend another 2/3 of the most important time trying to just build up their status or become secured, or to compare with their colleagues who get, all those things. That really damages people and slaves our brain, or happiness, or courage, or imagination, or all those things that has been destroyed. It's very easy to be destroyed because there's so much temptations and so much warning everywhere, and also nobody want to drop out from that system.
Yeah, I'm a high school dropout, so I've been there.
Yeah, I also never finished my college, and I just somehow naturally I feel there's something I don't want to sacrifice for something else. Where it's very hard to say what is fortunate or what is unfortunate, but I'm very clear we still hold on and of what we believe is right, and what we believe give us happiness, and what we believe to make us to realize we are created by some higher nature, made us to be individual. That's most important. But everybody talk about the individual. What is individual? And another thing is everybody talk about freedom. You will never have freedom if you don't fight. If you don't, the freedom only given to you as a rewarding by your sacrificing. So this is, but of course, you cannot teach people about that. They have to recognize what they have. Like a seed has to be buried underground to become a plant, or to have you have to go through that whole thing. You're not just like most mainstream tell you you have freedom. That's totally wrong. Yeah, it's not possible.
Yeah, I think that it's very popular to tell a story that everyone is so free, everything is so free. But the reality is we have a great freedom of expression in a very small space. You could do anything you want between this line and this line. But if you go beyond that, if you talk about something outside of that, if you say something that's a little bit unusual, now all of the constraints appear. Those could be, again, state constraints with the law and its punishments. Those could be popular constraints from the community and its opinion, which nowadays it's, we've all seen the sort of mob crowd effects come over on the internet, where disfavored opinions, even well-thought, well-grounded, well-argued opinions that contradict what is popular become attacked. And I think even journalists are very well aware of this. This is sort of sweeping the media landscape today. And then this comes down to this bottom issue that I think when you talk about freedom, you get back to. What does freedom mean when people are so comfortable that they don't want to do anything exceptional, that they don't want to do anything unusual, that they don't want to do anything unpopular? The only thing they want to do is what everyone else is doing because it's great. They're in their nice couch, even in a cheap apartment, even if they're not doing well economically, there's so much entertainment that they can get by. They can ignore their problems, their family's problems, the world's problems, and other people who are paid to think about these problems, corporations and governments, they take advantage of this vacuum where everybody else is kind of relaxing through the times, sometimes because they're lazy, but I think more charitably because they deal with problems and these unequal times where they have very little and these powerful people have so much, that they need an escape. They need a way psychologically to make it to the next day and show up at their work, which could be very difficult. It could be very unrewarding in order to keep on surviving. How do you think through this challenge of people who are, they maybe have power, but they don't realize they have power, and they have no desire to use their power because they're so traumatized. They're just looking to escape, right? They're not looking for revolution. They're just looking to survive.
Well, it's I think we all have potentials. That's for sure. You know, we as scientific find out we even no matter how hard we try, we only use very small part of our brain or our potentials. But it's very simple. It's like people would think, oh, they would make money. The money would put in the bank, and you know, but the way they're spending their money very often, if you look at the pattern, it's not really creates them something. It's just help them to accumulate more money and to keep the same lifestyle. So you are really about what you are spending on the next item, you know, that define who you are, you know, is when you economically, or if you, but still in the human reality, we are all defined by our act, you know, or on which side we are on, you know. That's very simple, you know. You don't have to do anything, but you have to be clear. I'm on this side or I'm on that side. Otherwise, you're just part of the whole darkness. You know, you know the outside your window somebody is being killed or raped or, you know, lost their home, but you just, you know, close the window and put a curtain on it. I mean, everybody knows it. This is happening. Come on, it's on the street right next to you, or neighbor has something. But in the West, basically, people are so used to this kind of comfort. And this kind of comfort basically come from the colonial time. You know, it can never be just that comfort. When you're born, you never really know how things are grow up on the field, or how the animal become a meat in the supermarket. You know nothing about it. You just enjoy the dinner or barbecue. I mean, come on, this is crazy. This is total corruption of a human mind in a very corrupted society. You know, if that can be recognized, there's no future. It only leads us to problem after problem. Doesn't matter how many dozens of presidents you're changing, it's getting worse and worse because you basically lost the basic truth. You know, that's our life, our living are really, if we have any meaningful thinking, the truth is always need to be protected. That's why the journalism, or so-called investigative journalism, are so crucial, because that is the shine of this stone. Otherwise, you don't have that. You're too soft, too much round corners, and it really leads you to a big disaster, you know, for human society. We see it's so common in this, you know, mainstream propaganda everywhere.
You know, this is one of the interesting things in my experience with the reporting of 2013 on mass surveillance, is it had such a powerful effect, not just in the United States, but around the world, because it kind of destroyed a myth that everybody believed, you know, some understanding we all thought we had. The idea that the government is listening to everything. In a lot of countries in Russia and China, I think it's popular. In places like the United States, it was seen as like a conspiracy theory, something, you know, your crazy uncle said. Now, we knew the government listened to some people and they had some capabilities. Even in places like Russia and China, I think, you know, they know the government's going after some troublemakers, some people they don't like. even if they're just political activists or students. But they had an understanding, or they thought they had an understanding of the limitations of it. They listen to a phone call, they intercept letters, they follow people on the street. But now there's this idea that the phone that you're not even using, it's just sitting in your pocket. You know, you're not looking at the screen, you're not using an app. That's connected to the cell phone tower. And the cell phone tower is recording that you were here at this time, and then you got on the train and you went to this place and you went to that place. Now there's this massive system of all of these technologies around us that are, even without human intervention, it just happens because of the way the system was built, instantaneously, automatically, always creating perfect records of private lives as best they can. And I think to a lot of people that shattered their understanding of how exposed they were, how vulnerable they were. And a lot of people, you know, they didn't have anything that they were personally afraid the police would come after them. But now they understand somebody knows this. You know, even if it's just the Facebook trying to sell you shoes. And I think there's an interesting dynamic between this technology that's making life so difficult for all of us. It's making us naked in so many ways to power, to those who hold power. And then on the other side, it's making life difficult for power in new ways. I mean, the fact that you and I are having this conversation right now, Weiwei, in previous generations, this would be impossible. The whole point of exile was a kind of social death sentence. It was to try to silence critics, right? Exile was allowed by authorities. People were allowed to go out or forced out of the country because then people wouldn't fight to the death. You know, you wouldn't have revolutionaries with rifles in the mountains. You'd force them out to Paris or something like that. And then, yeah, they'd be writing books. But no one in China or the United States or whatever would actually be reading them. They wouldn't be running for political office. They wouldn't be causing problems. But now, the same technology that is shaping our minds and our thoughts to limit us, to constrain us, is at the same time expanding our voices and allowing them to reach new places. And just, I wonder what you think about that, and do you feel that?
I think basically we all clear in the human society, the technology are being used by power, the authoritarian, all kind of authoritarians, could be corporation, could be, you know, democratic government as well as the capitalism or communist. They all have interest in control. You know, the most important function of any government, the more powerful and the more interest about to maintain the power and to control, to build the system. And in China, it's very clear. Chairman Mao put it very clear. We maintain the government with two barrels, gun barrel and the pen barrel. You know, this only need two, not like the West, you need a more complicated structure. He said very clear. You know, you just need a clear propaganda and you insist on it. During my detention, I asked my interrogator, I said, do you really believe the young people born in the 80s, 90s would believe in what you're talking about? It's absolutely lie. He really is a nice guy. He's thinking about it and hesitates, then tell me, wait, you're wrong. 90% more of people would believe in our lies. You know, they made it very clear. They made it, you know, you cannot make that kind of argument. You're just consumed. Even every individual are consumed by this huge machine, just like we are consuming chicken. You know, the factory produced chickens. I mean, And our human society, we are more and more become like that. You all go through the system, education, professional, and your life. They teach you what to like, what to look at, what to entertain, and what is your moral conditions about anything, patriotic or to be a lawful citizen or to be good husband and wife and the son and or go to good school. All those things it will waste everybody because you're consumed by government well designed, not necessarily government, but the whole society design the channel. You're just in that system.
So what can journalists do, independent journalists, investigative journalists, both inside these systems, like in China, where it's very dangerous to report on corruption or something like that, and also in countries where the threats aren't so direct, but they're not directed towards your safety, but they're directed towards your career. What should journalists be doing?
I think journalists are only two types. One type is independent thinker. So he will not depend on a system. And the others are just reporters belong to big corporations, state-owned or privately owned. Sometimes privately owned even worse than state-owned. It's even less truthful because they have their own interests. So they're just tools. They cannot do much because they're highly paid or not highly paid. They just have to work with somebody watching behind them. And there's editors there. There's also there's so many levels there. So it's not possible to make a real independent thinking or not encouraged to do this kind of investigation because they just cannot assign you to that kind of project. And even you did a good job, maybe you cannot even publish it very often. 10 articles, right? Maybe one can be published. So you are being discouraged to do anything which is deeper or has different meaning with the mainstream topic or conclusion. So this is almost, you're part of it. You cannot do much. You're on the boat and, you can write smaller stories, but not talk deeper than that. That's what happened in the United States and Europe, basically. You cannot raise deeper questions. It's not possible. You're not going to be popular. Nobody's going to listen to you. But even you're just independent, you're still very difficult. What happens recently? We see this Glenn, come out from his, this kind of independent media still have this kind of struggle. How far can you go? You always act like a betrayer.
But so let me push back about this because this is an interesting one, and I like the disagreement here because from my perspective, I'm one of these guys who was on the inside. I'm one of these guys who was discouraged from doing all these things. There were all these consequences. I didn't think, I had any power to change these things. I talked to my supervisors. I talked to my bosses. I talked to my colleagues about what was going on. Does it bother you? Is it okay? What should we do about it? And a lot of people inside, they were bothered by it. A lot of people knew it was wrong. A lot of people recognized government lies. But at the same time, it was the same thing that I felt we were all feeling socially, which is that nobody could do anything about it. And it's like you said about how you were looking at journalists today. You feel like they can't do much because the structures that they exist in. But then you cite something like the case of Glenn Greenwald, where they leave the system, they become more independent. And I think even the case of the reporting in 2013 that I was the source for shows that they can do big stories. Maybe it's exceptional, maybe it's difficult, maybe it breaks with what the organization once. I worked with reporters from The Guardian in the US and UK, The Washington Post, which is a big defender of the White House, Der Spiegel in Germany. Eventually the New York Times got a piece of it, but that wasn't through me. And a lot of other groups. The New York Times ran more pro-government reporting, interestingly, than critical reporting. But there's this idea, I think, for me. People look at me and what I did, and they talk about it, and they try to reduce it to he's a hero and did incredible things, or he's a traitor and did evil things. In either of these cases, they're trying to make me, and not me as an individual, but me as a class of person, a type of person, into something exceptional, into something abnormal, either on the bad side or the good side. And I think the way you're arguing is trying to do the same thing with journalists, where you go, look, there's a whole lot of ordinary journalists, and then there's really bad propagandists for the government, and then there's these really good, exceptional types of true, crusading white knight on a white horse, Hollywood investigative journalists. And I think that's true to an extent, but I think it's too simple. And this is why I say I don't want people to call me a hero, because I don't believe in heroes. I'm not a perfect guy. I've done terrible things in life, and I don't know you very well, but I'd like to think you probably have too, because you're human, and humans are imperfect, and humans are flawed, right? What made me different wasn't who I am, but the choices that I make. And so I say there are heroic actions, there are heroic decisions, and nobody in this world is more than one decision away from making those decisions themselves. And so I think I wonder in the press, if you were talking to somebody who works at the New York Times or, the People's Daily or something in China, we know the structures discourage them from doing certain things. But it's not what are they supposed to be doing, but what do you think they should be doing, even if it is a revolutionary act, even if it is a heroic act. One of the things that I think is interesting about how we live today, the fact that we have this conversation today, is, I can't really do anything to fight the NSA right now. You can't really do anything to fight the, Chinese authoritarian system when you're far away. Besides being a symbol, besides showing people that you can fight and you can win, and then you can keep fighting new fights in new ways. And this is why I'd like you to look back at that again. Do you really see nothing that journalists can be doing in the system, even if it's leaving the system? And if they do, how do you imagine, what are they not seeing that they could be seeing that maybe changes their life or their whole way of looking at their work and the way it's used?
Well, I think being an individual has this problem. You can be powerful because you're individual, but same times you're dropped out the society. So that is the fact. We are somehow all dropped out. Because by choice and also by not voluntarily, we want to be involved, to have a discussion, to have a real argument, to give us a chance to speak clearly. I always want to say, give me a chance to have a full sentence. But as long as you're part of a system, you're not going to have that power. So that's how many people want to drop out the system. It's not a hero or not hero. It's really, you have to make a decision. But I would say almost nobody wanted to put themselves in a vulnerable situation. And I think we are lucky we are living in this internet age. We still can have this kind of conversation. I can still, or whatever we said, it can be heard by people who want to hear. but that's very limited. And also even people who want to hear, they first not necessarily agree, and even the agree about it, they will never really take the same action, because it's very too rare, the chance. It's like lottery. It's too rare. How can you just buy it? Yes, the possibility is there. You just need a dollar and a dream, but that dream can be very long. And so it's nice just go to the street corner to buy a coffee and enjoy the sunshine. I know how many difficult nights you're going through. That's why your voice is so deep and you're so young and it's crazy. It's
it's crazy, but at the same time, it's right. And I think this is the thing for me. People ask things like, how do I sleep? Am I not worried? Am I whatever? I think if you can agree with the things that you do today, the funny thing is you don't have to worry about tomorrow, because it doesn't matter if tomorrow comes. You want to see tomorrow come. Who doesn't? I want to live for a very long time and have a very happy life. But we're only as good, I think, as our last choice. In terms of how do we survive the moment and keep going and keep moving forward, because the process of corruption and the fight against corruption, I think begins as an internal battle. I think about this as all my years working at the CIA and not saying anything against it. When I had questions, when I saw things that I disagreed with, going, as you said, I'm a part of a system. I'm just a guy at a desk. It's not for me to decide here what is right and wrong. And then going to the NSA and higher levels. But each of us in our lives, each of us in our work, we're all parts of different systems. Whether we're talking agencies, institutions, news organizations, or communities and societies. If we all engage in the same thinking, it's not for me to decide what's right and wrong. We're letting other people make those decisions for us. And unfortunately, in our highly complex and highly organized society, it's a very small group who get to decide what's right and wrong for all of us. And as you said earlier, they think the law is always on their side, right? What's right is what's right for them. What's wrong is what's wrong for them. And we need to democratize that. We need to be wider about that. And I think this is one of the crucial roles that journalism has, investigative journalism has in society, is when I talked before about the 2013 reporting of mass surveillance. There's this distance between suspicion. We all think the government is doing something, or we all think some bad thing is happening, climate change, and the fact of something's happening, the evidence, the documents, the recording, the proof, the science, and then convincing the world, not forcing the world, but persuading the world, convincing the world that it is correct. And I think this actually is a noble task. The question is just, we have so many power structures, as you talked about, that are trying to hijack this process. We have, that paint barrel of state propaganda that's trying to take this broadcast power, this mass communication, and force it to convince people of things, or persuade it to convince people of things that are not true, because it's right for them. But ultimately, every one of those writers, every one of those photographers, every one of those authors, thinkers, even every one of those people who's just on the couch at home watching TV, they all have to have something that they're thinking. They're all individuals. They all have a voice. And for me, the question is, like with the change in my life, like the change in your life, whether it comes from your story and the things that you saw as a child, your parents and your experiences, or whether it's what you witnessed, that you're not an extraordinary person, that you don't have an extraordinary background, but as you said, there's something happening outside, some crime, and you didn't close the curtains, but instead you went outside and you picked up a camera. People can change things. Maybe they can't fight the whole system, maybe they can't bring it down, as you said, particularly not alone, because as individuals, we're weak, we're exposed, we're vulnerable. But one person with a camera, one person with a pencil, they can convince other people. And that's how every revolution begins. That's why every, authoritarian system is afraid of the students. The students are poor. They don't have anything. They have nothing but passion and connection, because there's many of them around. Where do you see the next revolution beginning, both politically, globally, and also, I would say, the revolution in journalism? Because it seems to me this system that we have today, it seems very stable, but I don't think it actually is. I think everyone is suspicious of the way that it functions at scale. And as you said, whether it's these journalists leaving to begin their new outlets, we're seeing people try for something more independent, more honest, or more, genuine. It's what they truly believe. It's not edited in the same way for good and bad, but it's more authentic. People are looking, I think, today for that authenticity because they can feel the sameness, the repetition, as you said, people repeating the same words that they've heard somewhere else. And even if it's not said beautifully, or even if it's not said correctly, people recognize authenticity today, that original, genuine feeling. And I think they're searching for it because they're looking for that in themselves. So back to the actual question, just where do you see these structures that seem so stable today changing in, say, 10 years?
First, I think you and me act more like a priest. We are talking about a very common right or wrong, goodness or evil. Those are so common. That doesn't really take a profound thinking, or it's so common. Everybody can understand. Everybody would agree with, or say, yeah, But to really, I totally agree with you. We are living in a very fragile political condition as a human development. We have so much uncontrollable crisis could happen any moment, just like a pandemic, it's still not over, but it could be much more and much frequent. And as the place you are in, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin once said, you cannot organize a revolution. The revolution comes when the things are ready, So I don't think the situation is really bad enough. It's quite bad, but still, people, the light in the morning are gradually become bright. So it takes time, after the Industrial Revolution, the establishment of the more civilized world, it's only, become an extreme capitalism. It's still developing. We all see the almost the end of it, because we see so many things which they just cannot really solve those problems. But still, we see in general, people still avoid to talk about, to have some kind of morally, philosophically fundamental discussions, rather than just try to fix it. They either talk about minority discrimination or police brutality, or those those things are just symptoms. It's not the real problem. We all know it, but nobody want to talk about it. As long as nobody talk about it, then there's no solution, because simply there's no problem. You know, this kind of common understanding about there's no problems there are really biggest problem. And of course, very a few people, they all know there's a snake, but it's very different to see snake is under your table. You know, that what if you know, we all have knowledge about a snake somewhere, you know, but when you see it,
I think sometimes we do have to wait till people get bitten.
Yes, you have to wait for people to jump. So
yeah,
that's what I feel.
So this is an interesting thing. A lot of what you've said today is very, I think, realistic. You know, you look at the problems of the world and you see the difficulties with people acting, and you realize, we talked about the comfortableness of life. Until people become uncomfortable, it will be really difficult to get them to change in a meaningful way at scale. This sort of gets us back to the topic of like elections and the way things are today. You know, now we see Donald Trump likely leaving office, and so many people in media and elsewhere are going, oh, hooray, hooray, everything's better, you know, life is fixed. But they seem to forget that Donald Trump was a reaction to the system in place before him. And what we see with this election is actually just a return to the system that produced Donald Trump, not a new solution. This is literally as close to a direct return as in American politics is possible. And so our problems are actually likely unresolved and likely to return in the future. And one of the things that surprises, I think, a lot of people when they talk to me is they say I'm idealistic, I'm hopeful for someone who's, you know, faced the consequences that I have. How can I be so bright and like happy about what tomorrow looks like, knowing as I know how powerful these systems are, these technologies are, how intrusive they will become, and just how great the challenges are that we'll face tomorrow. And for me, the answer is, as long as these systems are designed by humans, they'll be directed by humans. And the one bright, beautiful thing about the political connection to technology is that the political people who direct a technology in the way it's used, they can't build it. They don't understand it. They're not technologists, they're politicians. And so they have to use other people. They have to, you know, order engineers, build this, do this, whatever. And many of those people are young. And when I talk to different audiences around the world, the one thing that I see is that the younger a person is, the more willing they are to depart from the system as it exists, the more willing they are to try something new, the more willing they are not to engage in the kind of reflexive analysis that a lot of us do, where they go, oh, that's crazy, or that's wrong, or that's dumb, but just to try something new. And sometimes that thing that's new is saying no, right? So I would ask you, what is it, when you look at all the problems of the world, that keeps you from becoming pessimistic? What is it that gives you hope about what things will look like in 10 years instead of just making you go, oh man, we've got problems?
I think that one thing is you have to know human nature. I always think we have to trust human nature because we have no other choice. We are human, you know, we are not cats or dogs, we are human. So we have this amazing brain, and our think about moral issues is very human, you know, and to have perspective about the universe, about other lifestyle, religions. So we really have a brain, you know, we really can make some kind of adjustment. And very often those brain are not functional because the education and the brainwash and the control and they use all kind of tactics, or we are very corrupted. I think it's not only government corrupted, more corrupted as the individual, and more bureaucrats in our daily behaving, or we just take it, it's just like government is part of us, it's just like Trump is part of the previous political effort, is Trump cannot just jump out. It's not possible. And the next one also would be continuity of this long-lasting political structure. So, but it comes back to individual. As individual, we are just like a grass or a plant. We are different, and that is enough to tell the universal truth. We have a rightful to grow, to fulfill our imagination and our judgment, and to create our own language. That's most important, to have your own language. Otherwise, you're not an individual. You think you're an individual, but you never exist before you create your own language. This is maybe talk too much, but that's true. Unfortunately, that's true. So, yeah.
Well, I'd like to say thank you. We should probably stop so we don't put the audience to sleep.
Yeah, I wonder why they never signal.
Yeah, they don't say stop.
Really.
But really, it's been a great pleasure to speak with you.
Wonderful.
And I've got to say, please keep fighting and stay free.
Yes, I think just be healthy, be safe. I want to see your
Yeah.
son or daughter and your family. You have a long time to go, and you're, in the very dark sky. I always want to see a shooting star, but I don't have that luck. I never see a shooting star. But you're the shooting star, and you're not going to disappear. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.